you've got a difference between, I was just thinking about this earlier today, that, processing accounts payable is a commodity. It's a routine process. Just about anybody can do it, but actually providing advice on maybe a transaction that's maybe it's a legal transaction, but have you thought about the financial implications of this? Have you looked at your healthcare plan, and are you working with a good creative broker that can help you design a competitive benefit plan that allows you to attract quality talent in the marketplace, but also is affordable for your company?
Welcome to the AI in Accounting podcast, which helps accounting, bookkeeping, and finance professionals prepare for the future of outsourced accounting and accounting technology. Plus, you'll learn how to use artificial intelligence, AI, automation, and machine learning to scale your accounting practice. Now, here's your host, Joshua Feinberg of Vic.ai.
Hi, it's Joshua Feinberg from the AI in Accounting podcast, and I'm being joined by a very special guest today, Pam Chelden, who is Principal of Accounting Solutions at the SC&H Group up in Baltimore. Pam, thanks so much for joining me today.
Sure, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Likewise. We usually like to start out these conversations is to learn a little bit more about your professional background, what got you to where you are in your career journey today, and where your role fits in with your firm as a whole. Could you?
Okay, sure. So I'm actually originally from North Carolina. I started my career in Charlotte, North Carolina with KPMG. So I started in audit. I spent 9 years with them. I left as an audit senior manager, and I moved to the Baltimore area and took a position with I'll call it a startup wireless services company. I've spent the last 20 years as a CFO in a couple of different industries. One is the logistics transportation space, and most recently in the ed tech space. So I have a good background of, public accounting as well as private industry. And I joined SC&H in January to head up the practice of accounting solutions, which is providing outsourced CFO, controller, and bookkeeper level services to small to mid-sized clients, preferably using cloud-based technologies.
Excellent. So I saw pretty recently in the last month or two, you had done a webinar on cash flow tips.
Yes.
For navigating, managing cash flow through a crisis, how to stretch your dollar, things like burn rate, runway, forecasting. How did the planning for that all come about?
So we actually were requested. We do a lot of work. Johns Hopkins has an incubator program for startup businesses, and we've gotten a couple of clients out of that. It's a really neat group of businesses that need support, and so they asked us to put on a cash flow webinar. So it was primarily directed to that group. So it's directed to non-accountants, and it was directed to people that are running their business, and certainly during this economic time, trying to manage your cash flow. It was actually something that came very easily and naturally to me because I had just spent 3 years with an ed tech company where I managed cash every day. Cash was a little bit tight, so I learned a lot in those 3 years, as well as with the transportation company. That was something that was always top of mind, is just your cash flow and understanding the sources and the uses of that. And so over the years, I had actually developed my own forecasting method in Excel that the investors seem to like when I put it together. And accountants do balance sheet, income statement, and a cash flow statement, but to me, the cash flow statement is something it's really hard to understand in I think layman's terms. So I put together my own cash flow schedule that basically showed, okay, here's the deposits coming in from customers, and here's your cash going out the door. Like, get rid of all the accounting, like prepaids and deferred, and like, what's your cash doing? And to me, cash is king. And so focusing on that and understanding your trends. If you understand kind of your monthly or weekly trends, it's a lot easier to try to project out those trends on a go-forward basis. And then, for a lot of companies, cash is tight, and you have to manage to that and understand when you're going to have certain expenses hit and making sure that you're collecting from customers, or do you need to raise funds or get additional line of credit to cover those costs?
You find when you're working with entrepreneurs at an incubator, you keep answering the age-old thing of explaining the difference between the profit and loss and what shows up on the cash flow statement, or do you find over time that becomes less of an issue?
I don't. Probably the biggest thing I have to explain, because I think entrepreneurs, they get cash. Naturally, they're all really smart, right? So they get cash, they get balance sheet income statement. The thing they probably struggle with the most is the deferred revenue and, the difference between bookings and revenue. So that's usually an area that we spend some time talking about. The good thing with deferred revenue is usually you've collected the cash up front, but you've got a service that you've got to deliver over time. So just understanding the difference between cash versus revenue and what's showing up on your financial statements is an important differentiator to understand.
Like timing and the idea of accruals on.
Yes, yeah. So just, accruals. I think deferred revenue, and there's, lots of guidance out there in the accounting world on when you have to recognize revenue and how you recognize it. So, just making sure that you follow the rules properly. But at the end of the day, it's just like, what's the cash flow impact, right? That's what matters when you're a startup business.
So it sounds like you're extremely hands-on with the advice that you give to small business owners. When you put on your hat of running a practice that's providing outsourced accounting solutions, in your years of working as a CFO in private industry, what would you say is your biggest tip for someone that's just launching an outsourced practice to think about? What's the biggest piece of advice that's super important to focus on?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have somebody who has been in both public accounting as well as private industry accounting. It is just really different. It's two different skill sets. And you can be really great at one, but understanding both is, to me, kind of the ideal package here. Audit teaches you how to, prove out balance sheet items and make sure that they're accurate. You got documentation to support it, which is very important. But actually the process of closing the monthly books on a regular basis, doing account reconciliations for every account, analyzing the P&L, understanding the trends, understanding your expenses, your income, and how that all relates so that you can actually translate that to your management team so that they understand it on a business perspective. It's just a unique skill set that is not really learned at a detailed level in public accounting. So I just think you need to have that. You need to have both.
So if somebody were to, right out of school, join a team like yours in accounting solutions after a couple of years, their best bet, if they really want to eventually progress to leadership, is to work in private industry for a couple of years and then potentially circle back so they'd have that breadth of experience.
I think so. I think it helps. I think, I'm finding that it resonates when I'm talking with prospects about our services, that I've actually sat in the CFO chair. I've made these decisions, and I'm building a team out that consists of controllers that have been controllers and sat in that chair. And I think it's resonating with our clients and our prospects.
Yeah, it sounds like it's really hard to get that empathy without having walked in those shoes.
Accounting, there's such a wide spectrum with accounting, right? It comes in all shapes and colors and sizes. And when I was studying accounting in school, it really wasn't what I thought I would do as my career. I always liked math and stuff, and I always thought accountants were the folks that wore the green eye shade and sat in a broom closet and added up a bunch of numbers. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised when I got into the business of accounting and into business that it was much more about people and relationships and understanding business than it was about accounting and the numbers. But I feel like I have, obviously an accounting base, and I'm a CPA, that I understand the numbers. But to me, the differentiation that I can bring to my clients is just an understanding of how accounting affects business and how to translate the numbers to actually help you make strategic decisions. Accounting gives you a really good snapshot of the history and the historical, but what business owners want is, okay, how does this impact me going forward? How can I use that data to make decisions to drive changes in the future so that I can be more profitable and I can drive more revenue, make better decisions?
That seems to be the holy grail where a lot of leaders in outsourced accounting and client accounting services are trying to head to, is to trying to improve their processes, improve their workflow so they can free up the time, free up the budget, a combination of the two to really move into true advisory services.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's, you've got a difference between, I was just thinking about this earlier today, that, processing accounts payable is a commodity. It's a routine process. Just about anybody can do it, but actually providing advice on maybe a transaction that's maybe it's a legal transaction, but have you thought about the financial implications of this? Have you looked at your healthcare plan, and are you working with a good creative broker that can help you design a competitive benefit plan that allows you to attract quality talent in the marketplace, but also is affordable for your company? And I think, if you've been through that, you can provide that advice, and that's something different than just debits and credit. So I think there's a difference between commodity, services that you can provide on an outsourced basis versus strategic financial advice that you can provide.
What advice would you offer to someone who has been providing outsourced CFO services, outsourced accounting solutions for several years? What are the bumps in the road that someone is unlikely to experience if they find themselves in the position of running an outsourced accounting team and they're 3 years out of college?
So a couple things that I would think. So one of the things, a couple of thoughts here is, I think it's a really interesting position to be in because I get exposure to a lot of different industries and companies. Whereas when I was in private accounting, private industry, I worked for one company, one business, one model, right? So this allows me to get exposure to multiple businesses and multiple companies. And I find that really fascinating. So that's one thing. And then I think the fact that I'm able to kind of leverage my years of experience to be able to help small to mid-sized companies affordably make good financial strategic decisions, to me is very rewarding. So I think, I would encourage anybody with similar backgrounds to mine to get into this field because I think it's very exciting and it is rewarding.
What I've heard a lot of also, and speaking with people in similar roles here, especially I noticed you do some work, grab some certifications around Sage Intacct. I've actually heard this with a lot of Sage Intacct experts as well, where they started working in private industry and they got introduced to the platform by like an integrator or consultant, and they loved it so much that they ended up going to work with a firm, and now all they do all day, instead of like Sage Intacct being one of 20 things they're responsible for, is they help 20 different firms with their Intacct implementations. And it's so it must be such a different routine.
It is. I mean, I'm the beneficiary of when I joined the firm. They were already a Sage partner, and they were using that as their platform, and so they had vetted it. And I'm really impressed with it because it is a true cloud-based ERP system, and they have a console view that is perfect for small to mid-size clients. It's Sage Intacct's way of trying to compete with QuickBooks. So a lot of companies use QuickBooks startups, but Sage Intacct is more of an ERP system. QuickBooks is good for really small businesses, non-accountants trying to use it to generate financial statements. Once you grow beyond that, I think Sage Intacct is a perfect platform for that. And again, I'm not a Sage Intacct sales rep, but we use it, and I find it really easy to navigate. When my whole team had to go remote on March 15th, when the whole world shut down and things shut down, at least in Maryland they did, it was seamless for my team because all of our technologies are cloud-based technologies. And that's not where I was before. So before I joined SC&H, my controller would come into my room with a stack of checks and, hard copy invoices and say, here's the check run, can you review this? And, sign the checks. And that was my process. And I thought it was actually fine. And it wasn't until I joined SC&H, and they already had this all set up, that the light bulb went off. And I was like, wow, we use Bill.com to pay all of our vendors. and our vendors just email the invoices right in. There's artificial intelligence that reads the vendor and the dollar amount. It gets coded. We review it. There's an automated workflow process between us and our clients. It gets automatically synced into Sage Intacct. We pay our vendors, and it's all in the cloud, which I think is phenomenal. So we, my whole team, we used to come into the office. We liked working together. We would see each other, in the hallway, but now we're remote. We've been remote since March, and I'm not sure we'll ever go back. And I think, luckily we were set up with all cloud-based technologies that made that really, really seamless. And I do think that's the future. That was probably your next question, Josh, but I think that is the future of particularly outsourced accounting. And I think just cloud technologies are really enabling that process, and we're able to provide clients with quality level financial services that's usually cheaper than hiring that directly yourself.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of education that goes into getting them to understand the difference between the level of services you're providing versus a very entry level bookkeeper, like night and day. And and a lot of times, I guess it may be that they have to first experience what happens with compliance and cash flow issues and making payroll and being able to produce the kind of statements that make banks and investors comfortable.
Yep. Usually they come in with a request, right? Like, we've got investors and they're telling us these QuickBooks reports just aren't going to do it anymore. Or they've got a lender on the hook and the lender wants, regular routine kind of GAAP-based financial statements. And so they're usually kind of growing out of their element to deliver on that.
What do you see as the biggest mistake that accounting firms can make with outsourced accounting, outsourced bookkeeping, client accounting services? Have you been in your role long enough where you've taken over some work that's come over from other firms and you're kind of cringing at how things were done? Has there been any situations like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think having a team that has nothing but public accounting in their background is probably a mistake. So I think, again, and we talked about that as one of the first questions, is having that, dual experience, I think, is really critical. I think also, it's not a one size fits all solution for clients. I think you need to be flexible in what you can offer. And I think you have a spectrum of services. You have to be comfortable that you can deliver on all aspects of those services, but being able to be flexible is, I think, a winning ticket.
I know you mentioned you work with a lot of startups. Has that flexibility led you to a place where you've developed any vertical markets, any industries that your firm is choosing to specialize in your practices?
It has.
Especially
Yeah, it's led us to a lot of like medical device and biotech companies, which is really fascinating. And then also a fair number of nonprofits. Sage Intacct is really set up really well to handle that. It allows for multiple dimensions of reporting and capturing. And so, I mean, pretty much any kind of service industry. We are rather industry agnostic, with the exception of probably like full process manufacturing. It's just not something, I don't currently have any clients today that fit that bill, and I don't have the experience for that. So that's not something right now that's in our future to pursue.
I find it amazing when I talk to people in similar roles in different firms in all parts of the country. That exception came up a week or two ago as well, is that's the one red flag with a certain kind of industry that they feel like if he didn't have a specialist on his team who came from a hardcore manufacturing background, that they'd be really reluctant to take it on.
Yeah, there's some unique accounting needs in that space. So it would be better to have somebody who has experience in industry doing that, right? It's around raw materials, work in process, capturing, it's cost accounting.
Yeah.
So
you see the emergence of a lot of client accounting services and outsourced accounting teams too, putting out thought leadership content similar kind of to the webinars you're doing and ebooks and videos on social that a lot of times are very specific to vertical markets that I guess they're looking for high growth areas as well. And as the world becomes more digital and geographic location becomes less vital, could see that becoming a big trend too.
Yeah. We have a client actually that's based in the Czech Republic. So, yeah, so geography is not a concern. Thank you, technology.
Cloud definitely makes it. What's interesting too is I come from the IT services background, and for 10, 15, 20 years, managed service providers have been trying to get their clients to think about hurricanes, earthquakes, fires, floods, sabotage, and it just didn't click. And then I guess this is kind of the mother of all contingencies to plan for. And if you still needed to come into the office to have a check passed around from person to person, envelopes passed around, or running something that's still on the desktop as opposed to in the cloud. Yeah, this is definitely, there was that cartoon going around back in April or May, not that they should have made light of it, but like what was responsible most for digital transformation in your company, your CEO, your CIO, or COVID-19? And I guess the implication was that if the CEO couldn't get everyone to make the changes and the CIO couldn't make the changes to take digital transformation seriously, that having all of a sudden all accounting firms are remote accounting firms now to a certain degree.
Yeah.
The foreseeable
I mean,
future.
I think that's actually a good thing that's coming out of COVID, is it's really forced the whole digital, it's forced Zoom calls and video conferencing and video chatting, and then just cloud-based. If your company was not cloud enabled before now, man, you either had to quickly pivot to that, or or you're going to be left behind.
It's fortunate for the firms that had been proactive enough to be there before March, because I'm sure it was a lot less stressful to already have those changes in place. And then you're dealing with a tax season that got pushed back multiple months and all of this, and industries that were especially hard hit, having to everyone I talked to has been forced to get an MBA and PPP and CARES the last few months.
Yes, we spent a lot of time on that. We had most of our clients that applied for it received it, so that was nice. But yeah, we definitely developed a specialty in PPP, and now we're working on the loan forgiveness side of it. So never a dull moment.
Trusted advisor all around.
Yeah.
Pam, what's the best way for someone to learn more about the work that you do at SC&H, or reach out to you if they have any questions?
Yeah, sure. So feel free to visit our website, schgroup.com. We've got an accounting solutions page that talks a little bit more about what we do, or feel free to either email or call me, and I'll be happy to talk with you a little further about our services.
Are you active on LinkedIn too?
Yes, okay. Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, Pam, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today to talk about your career experience and starting out in public accounting, and a lot of great experience in nonprofits and ed tech as a CFO, and how that's really framed your whole approach to being able to take outsourced accounting up to a whole different level. And it's great advice too for someone that's thinking about what their career might look like 5, 10, 15 years down the road, to get that balanced experience of working with lots of different clients and understanding the context of delivering that within a public accounting firm.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me, and I enjoyed having a conversation with you today.
Likewise. Thanks so much for your participation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the AI in Accounting podcast. To subscribe and leave a review, check us out at blog.vic.ai or wherever you like to consume podcast episodes, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube.